Welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone here today, and so happy to be part of celebrating GRC at 3, which is a wonderful organization and, of course, a wonderful growth, I would say, of the network that we need in this day and age to regenerate life on the ocean planet Earth. I will share my slides and then look forward to doing some Q&A as well. And if we have enough time, feel free to add questions to the chat, or if there's some question for clarification, chime right in, and be happy to carry that as we go. Let me see if I can get my coordinates right on our presentations. There we go. Hopefully that's working well. Let me know if it's not, but we'll use that as a basis. I'm at the Climate Foundation, Brian von Herzen, Executive Director at the Climate Foundation, and I've got a bush turkey visiting me. Greetings from the hinterlands of the Sunshine Coast, Jinibara territory in Queensland, Australia. And it's wonderful here, a beautiful sunny morning. And I will say that we've got an abundance of bird life here. We have a family of nesting kookaburras just right around the corner. And they've been growing beautifully, and it's great to have them adding to our acoustic symphony here in my outdoor office. So anyway, if you hear any side noises, you'll know where they're coming from. And we focus at the Climate Foundation on food security for billions of people who depend on the oceans for their primary sustenance, and enough food not only for humanity, but for marine ecosystems and the 8 million species who cannot vote, and terrestrial ecosystems as well. And then finally, we're able to measure the carbon export of these regenerative interventions. And that's really profound. And in recent months, we've just recently learned that it's not food or carbon, it's food and carbon. And what it comes down to is we're growing plants, marine plants in this case, for food security in the form of food, feed, and fertilizer agricultural amendments. At the same time, we can measure the quarter of the seaweed that falls off our platforms during growth and sinks 1,000 meters a day to the abyssal seafloor, where it remains for centuries. It's a very simple, correct measurement. There's one of the kookaburras. It's almost on cue. And anyway, it's great to have be in this abundance of nature. And really, I think nature-based solutions is a key aspect of everything that we need to do. Because if we get to zero carbon, but we're on a dead planet, will we really have succeeded? This is really an opportunity for us to bring most of the species with us on Spaceship Earth that we were born with, and ensure that they can have space and habitat on this planet to survive and even to thrive. Now, sadly, with global warming, we have seen 93% of the heat of global warming going into the surface oceans today. And that's resulted in several ecosystems which are within 1 degree of mortality to be compromised. And that includes the kelp forests in temperate latitudes, which in the summer live within 1 degree of mortality, and the coral reefs in the tropics that each summer also live within 1 degree of mortality. And so we need to find a way to address these ecosystems that are on the brink. Another way of viewing the problem is this schematic view of the oceans, and that is the Southern Ocean represented as a cylinder with depth on the vertical axis, and the Pacific Ocean as an example on the right. And the latitude goes from 60 degrees south to 60 degrees north. But these brown zones and red zones represent extra heat going into the ocean, decreasing natural upwelling, and decreasing the amount of natural upwelling and nutrients supply that are provided in the middle and deep ocean from reaching the surface. And that's really the source of nutrients for kelp forests from California to the tip of Tasmania. And our challenge and our opportunity is to find a way to fill this nutrient value chain gap, because this increase is 5 to 20% more stratification and 30 to 40% less primary production than we had pre-industrially. It presents a huge challenge. I was recounting to some colleagues earlier today how in the 1860s, the U.S. Geodetic Survey plotted the 1/2 kilometer wide river of kelp that existed from Point Concepcion all the way past the Mexican border. And this river of kelp was such an obstacle that they had to put it on navigational maps, because you could not enter Santa Barbara Harbor, for example, without crossing that river of kelp. And no one alive today has a living memory of the kelp forests that were in the 1800s. And yet it's documented in our geodetic survey maps from the early 1800s. I have some pictures of that somewhere. They're not here. But sadly, there have been 2 decimations, one in the 1930s from siltation and runoff from farming that was transforming the landscape in the 1930s. And then in the last 20 years, the temperatures have been exceeded to the point where we've lost 95% of the Australian macrocystis kelp forest off the eastern Tasmanian shoreline. And similarly, we've lost 90% of the Nearocystis kelp forest off Northern California. And these are devastating losses because it's an ecosystem shift. It shifts from healthy forest to urchin barrens, and the urchins aren't happy and the seaweed's not happy, and we lose a huge amount of habitat. Similarly, in the tropics, we've lost 60% or more of the production during marine heat waves of the tropical seaweeds, representing the 2nd largest harvest from the ocean. It's around 10 million tons per year now for food, feed, and fertilizer products. And that presents a huge crisis. And that's where we're beginning, is by trying to develop a deep water irrigation system that can do for rice fields what irrigation did on land. Solar irrigation has transformed the production of rice, and we can restore natural upwelling, develop a sustainable yield, if you will, with marine permaculture by ensuring high production of these seaweeds. And then finally, being able to enable and help local ecosystems, whether it's habitat for sardines or measuring the carbon export, we can identify those ecosystem services and ensure that it works and works well. So we have seen evidence of this on our smaller platforms, a sketch of which is on the left. We've seen squid eggs in the middle, these white eggs living around the seaweed. We've seen little turtles living in the seaweed as well, and even game fish and other kinds of reef fish hanging out in our floating island of life that's on in the Western Pacific in the Philippines. There are a couple ways of restoring natural upwelling with deep water irrigation. Historically, we've talked a lot about regenerative upwelling shown on the right that involves wave or wind or solar energy to actually pump water up from the deep, irrigate the kelp forest, and enable it to thrive once again. That works pretty well. It does involve a fair amount of energy. What we found is a way to reduce that energy by a factor of 10 to 100, and that is with what's called deep cycling. And it turns out seaweeds act like a sponge. They do an amazing job of concentrating nutrients. They'll soak up sunlight during the day and in the top meter of the sea. And at night, we lower them down to past the thermocline, past the nutricline, and they soak up nitrate and phosphate and other nutrients in the middle sea. And then at sunrise, we bring them back up to the surface again, where they absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide once again. So this deep cycling ends up being much more efficient way of doing marine permaculture. And this kind of deep water irrigation will be useful much of the time if we need to restore coral reefs, or we need to address shallow areas that need to recover when it comes to seaweed cultivation. We may have to do the upwelling, but most of the time we can probably do deep cycling and water depths of 100 meters or more. And we have 2 platforms now that are out at that depth, one at 180 meters and another platform in the Western Pacific at 350 meters depth. And this is a picture of the 350 meter deep platform. We have a couple of divers on it. This is a 100 square meter area, and it has a lot of advantages. In fact, it was resilient to the hurricane we encountered a year ago in the Philippines. It survived a Category 5 hurricane. We lowered the platform down 5 meters, and it managed to not only survive intact, but most of the seaweed was still on it. And we were growing seaweed the day after the hurricane. And some time after the actual hurricane event, some months later, in the last few months, we've been able to provide a 1/4 ton of seedlings to our neighboring communities so they could start cultivating again, because it's been a real dearth of seaweed ever since the hurricane went through the central Philippines. Now, in terms of growth rates, we've been able to see 100 to 300% growth per month in regions, including the deep sea, where quite frankly, the control seaweeds, the ones in red, weren't growing at all, or even were shrinking by up to 50% in that same month. So that's been a big transformation for us. And presently we are building out the 1,000 square meters. We hope to launch that platform. That's 1/10 of a hectare or a quarter acre. And we're working on that and deployment in the coming weeks. And then phase 4, which we will begin in earnest early next year, is going to be a full hectare, which will be a commercial scale system that we hope to build the regenerative model to show that we can sustainably deep water irrigate and cultivate seaweeds and provide an economic closed cycle, if you will. And that's the beginning of planting and growing hectares in thousands of communities across the Indo-Pacific and eventually the Mediterranean. We see this as a huge opportunity to enable really and restore the nutrient value chain gaps that have and enable nature to thrive once again. I have a short animation here of our 1,000 square meter platform to be launched in a matter of weeks. This system, there may be a little bit of speech that goes along with it.
Architecture, grow seaweed. From water fish pen designs, this ring structure can withstand offshore storm conditions. The 2 rings protect the central floating solar panels, which provide energy for deep water irrigation of temperate kelp or tropical red seaweeds growing in the outer circle. Such irrigation enables seaweed to thrive offshore, opening up new regions for cultivation. These platforms also enable faster growth and partial harvest cultivation.
That's just a snapshot of a hectare scale ring that we're anticipating to develop. We're happy to say that we've had an amazing amount of resilience in the Philippines with the advent of this hurricane. We've had a number of colleagues actually leave the Philippines because they couldn't see a way to keep seaweed cultivating in the Philippines in the face of these 20 named cyclones per year that come barreling through the Philippines. And so unless we have climate resilience measured in multiple ways, and that is marine heat wave resilience and being able to survive high temperatures and low nutrients. An aspect of those high temperatures are the fuel for these hurricanes. And so we'll get more and more high intensity hurricanes in the future. And they're devastating to the coastline, as you can see on the left, which was an image from last December right in the town that we're working in. But the good news is that the platforms have survived. We can lower them 5 or 10 meters below the surface. They can become seed banks, if you will, for neighboring communities to regenerate their kelp forestation and seaweed forestation. And ultimately, we see the opportunity to regrow and to become utterly hurricane resilient as well as heat wave resilient. So we see that as a key aspect of what we're doing. Another key aspect are going to be the products that enable terrestrial agriculture to become more drought and heat resilient as well, which I'll get into shortly. Our most recent launch has been this large surface platform that is solar electric powered. It has a solar battery system on it, and it's able to raise and lower up to a hectare of seaweed every day. And we're thrilled to have this launched and in the water and operating now. The launch is depicted on the right. It was at night in order to take advantage of the high tide. And with this platform in place, we'll be able to support much larger platforms in the sea, submersible seaweed platforms, and be able to really scale what we're doing. So we're thrilled to have that contribution occurring. This next animation was some aspects of a tour around the platform. It's in 180 meters of water, and it's some 1,400 meters offshore. So this is going to be a great enabler, if you will. We launched it on the very day that Artemis launched for the moon. So we're really happy to have that new capability in the water. So we've identified a dozen value chains for seaweed in the marketplace, but it starts with food and feed and biostimulants as fertilizer. And those are basic markets. Each one's a multi-billion-dollar market, but that enables us to really build an ecosystem for marine permaculturists across the Indo-Pacific. And we see this as a great opportunity to build and scale. And we've had several countries already indicate an interest in developing this capability, showing that it works, showcasing it, proving it in their own exclusive economic zone waters, and enabling this to scale. So we're thrilled to see rapid adoption in the Pacific Rim countries. One of our initial products are these biostimulants, which can be provided by the leader, and literally 1 liter per hectare per week is enough to enable the maintaining of crop yields with 20% less nitrate fertilizer application. The last I checked, a nitrate fertilizer had gone up in price by a factor of 3 to a factor of 7 in Europe. And that presents a huge food security challenge for farmers and cultivators that are wanting to ensure we've got food security on the planet for the months and years to come. So any opportunity to reduce the need for nitrate by 20% or more while maintaining crop yields is a huge transformation. In a replete NPK environment, it can also increase yields from 15 to 30%. But I think in this day and age, getting by with less is going to be essential, and maintaining those production levels with lower fertilizer inputs actually has profound consequential benefits. We've seen this with multiple species, not just rice, but this is Chinese cabbage, which is called pichai in the Philippines. With no additives, we have a fairly bleak landscape, and these trials were conducted by the Philippine government as part of our approval process. With just fertilizer, you have pretty good results. Just biostimulant, you have even better results. And with moderate fertilizer and moderate biostimulant at an application rate of 1 liter per hectare per week, we have the superior results. And we're thrilled to see that benefit across multiple species. In fact, most flowering plants we've seen that have had this benefit. And our opportunity, I think the United States only has a 3% adoption of biostimulants today in agriculture. One of the best things that biostimulant does, like Big Grow, is it confers drought and heat resilience to crops. And this day and age where you've got drought and heat problems across the US, this is a huge opportunity to ensure robust crops even in times of climate disruption. I like to say we live on ocean planet Earth, and ocean planet Earth has already stored about 45 times as much carbon as we've put into the atmosphere, or is in the atmosphere today. And a third of humanity's carbon is already in the ocean. So it represents a great opportunity, and there's plenty of room at the bottom. In fact, this is a picture, this black rectangle represents the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, a third of which is anthropogenic. And our challenge and opportunity is to take that third of the carbon and place it into the middle and deep ocean, represented by this largest blue rectangle. There's plenty of room at the bottom, and it's a matter of locally monitoring oxygen levels and upstream and downstream algae blooms. And with those monitorings in place, I believe we can, in a distributed way, 1 hectare at a time, stave off the Permian mass extinction, recapitulation triggered by anthropogenic greenhouse gases and global warming. In fact, I'm pleased to say that many of these kelp forests represent shown in the bars in the bottom, represent a 15% greater carbon fixation per square meter per year even than the tropical rainforests that are shown in the middle bars here. So it represents a great opportunity to regenerate and restore marine productivity. The seaweed that does sink past 300 meters can be stored for up to 100 years, and past 1,000 meters can be stored for potentially many hundreds of years, if not 1,000 years. And this represents an opportunity to measure the seaweed that falls off the platforms during growth and sinks 1,000 meters a day to the seafloor. And finally, the biostimulant can not only remove approximately 8,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per square kilometer per year of kelp forestation, but can also, through the biostimulant action, reduce the amount of nitrate fertilizer that's needed by 20%, which in fact reduces the amount of CO2 emissions that would be required to produce that nitrate fertilizer. So we can avoid 12,000 tons of emissions associated with nitrate fertilizer manufacturing, and we can avoid 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent as a result of the nitrous oxides that we're able to keep from coming out of the soils as well. Not to mention 20% less runoff back into the ocean. So it represents a what I'll call a virtuous ecology as well as a virtual circular economy. And every square kilometer of marine permaculture can be transformational. We've lost 3,000 square kilometers in the US and Australia alone in the past century of kelp forests. And our first challenge and opportunity are to regenerate those ecosystem services and then measure what can be done in an integrated way. This particular slide shows our catcher's mitt that catches the seaweed falling off the platform, and every square meter can be measured. The flux can be measured on a daily basis, and that presents the basis for robust seaweed methodology. In addition, we can see the seaweed that sinks. This animation shows a bit of the seaweed sinking that occurs. I'm going to run this a bit faster, and these small, let's see if that goes. Maybe it's just a short one, but these small clumps of seaweed actually are dropping several thousand meters per day, and so we're able to enable that to thrive as well. And let's see if I can get this to work. We've also measured the seaweed sinking of multiple different species of seaweeds, and the green seaweed is alva. We have red seaweeds, euchematoid seaweeds, and then we've had colleagues publish the time since the last contact with the atmosphere in the Pacific Ocean, and that's from 60 degrees south to 6 degrees north. As you can see throughout the subtropical oceans, we're looking at 1,000-year timescales potentially, and on the right side, the estimated time before the next contact with the atmosphere. So what happens is the seaweed sinks 1,000 meters a day to this deep ocean area, and then it moves from the Australian area all the way up towards Canada, the west coast of Canada, and that's where the upwelling occurs some several hundred years later, and then it goes through the Indonesian through flow in several circuitous paths through the surface. And so the radiocarbon ages of the seawater help to inform this data and actually provide constraints as to the number of centuries before that water will see the surface again. The US Department of Energy has estimated that if we can grow 182,000 square kilometers of kelp, which is far less than 1% of one ocean, and represents just 1 or 2% of the US exclusive economic zone, that's enough to capture 1 gigaton of carbon dioxide per year. And so that represents a climate wedge, according to the researchers at Stanford University. And we're looking forward to building a climate wedge with our partners across the Pacific in thousands of communities, building hectare scale marine permaculture as we go forward. There's approximately, in all the 3 oceans, 200 million square kilometers of mostly empty ocean that are accessible to and amenable to marine permaculture in almost all waters greater than 100 meters depth. And that's been the basis of our winning the Xprize for carbon removal milestone award in April. We're so grateful for that recognition and support, which provides 1/3 of the funds that we'll need for the first hectare. The first hectares are expensive, but as we build a dozen hectares, we'll produce lots of seaweed and biostimulant and carbon export. And most critically, as we get past a dozen hectares, the capital costs get below $1 million per hectare. As we get past 100 hectares, the costs drop below $500,000 per hectare. As we get past 1,000 hectares deployed, the marginal cost of deploying a hectare will drop to $300,000. So we're enthusiastic to move through this Wright's Law curve that will ultimately get us to high volume production and lower costs and enable new applications, including eliminating antibiotics in chickens. I was amazed to learn that 70% of the birds on the planet today are chickens. And what we need to do is move them off antibiotics, which are presently used mostly for, they're mostly used to improve the feed conversion ratio. And surprisingly, there were some researchers in Canada who actually supplied them with seaweed instead of antibiotics. And the result was a better survival rate on seaweed than on the antibiotics. And so I think that's a beginning of reform, and we hope to bring that. If you know anyone in the chicken industry, we need to bring this reform to that industry. We address more than half of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're looking forward to enabling coastal communities and First Nations and Indigenous peoples to thrive and really help in building natural capital. We have a team of 12 in the Philippines. We are a global team with several full-time staff in Europe, many volunteers in North America, and over 12 staff and volunteers presently on deployment in our project in the Philippines. And we're looking forward to expanding to multiple countries in the coming years, including Australia. We have a plan to bring the first model marine permaculture to the kelp forests off of California, North America's first permaculture in 2024. And so we'll be fundraising for that starting next month. And we're looking forward to getting involvement of people up and down the California coast, the West Coast, and all of America to prove that the model works on kelp in the States and enable that to be fully on board. We're so appreciative of our many advisors, including Tom Chi from Google X and his work in regenerating life on the soils and the seas, Paul Hawken and his work with Regeneration, and Sir David King, to name a few, from the University of Cambridge. And these are just some of the leaders who have been instrumental in helping us to transform our work. And we've had support from many organizations and articles in The Economist and the Washington Post. And we so appreciate the support we've had from many individuals and organizations over the past half a decade. This is a picture of the wonderful chalk talk that was put in Santa Barbara at the Santa Barbara, well, it was the California Seaweed Festival, perhaps a year ago. And they made this beautiful chalk illustration of the potential for marine permaculture. And we hope the first platform will be in the Santa Barbara Channel in as early as 2024. So we're looking forward to building support for that. And with that, I'll be happy to turn this over to questions. Really thrilled to have everyone here today, and happy to talk more about regenerating life in the seas and the soils. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's really encouraging to hear your stories. But if you have questions or comments, I just use your virtual hand, and we'll see if we can organize them that way. It looks like Cody handled the question from Deborah in the chat, and I've got a few things I'm curious about, but I'll wait on mine.
No, that's wonderful. That's great. And happy to, sorry, I haven't had a chance to read the chat while I was doing the presentation, but happy to. Oh, here's a question. Cabot has his hand raised.
Yeah.
Oh, and Catherine, be second.
Hi, sorry, you can barely see me, but I'm trying to conserve power here with a candle. Excuse me. Can you tell us what biostimulant is? You probably said at the beginning, but I missed it.
No, that's a great point. Thank you for that question. We're used to NPK fertilizers, and either being added to the soil or being generated by soil microbial communities and unlocked by fungi, etc. Biostimulant, surprisingly, is a multiplier on macronutrients and micronutrients that are available. So if you apply, what's typically done is we dilute the biostimulant. It's a liquid that's derived from seaweeds. It has in it natural plant growth regulators that are just part of the seaweed extract. And we take the liquid from the seaweed and we dilute it 100-to-1 and then spray it on the leaves of the plants in the morning. And the liquid goes into the stomata of the plants. And these natural plant growth regulators actually upregulate the gene expression of the plants, which improves the uptake efficiency of nitrate and phosphate and micronutrients into the plant and enables the same amount of fertilizer to be provided to the plant with 20% less application externally. And so just by improving that uptake efficiency, it's able to effectively be a fertilizer multiplier, if you will. So surprisingly, it's funny because you go to an industry like vineyards in Napa, they wouldn't think of doing business without biostimulants because you get more grapes, you get bigger grapes, you get higher yields, and you get drought resilience, which is so essential up and down the California coast. So what's standard in, let's say, the vineyard business is hardly practiced at all when it comes to row crops. We see some application of it here in Australia in horticulture, but I think there's a great opportunity. And you may, if you go to a aquaponics shop in California, for example, there are several seaweed products on the market, and this really complements and adds to those. But our desire is to increase the production and decrease the cost of these biostimulants to enable them to be used in row crops like the rice fields we're talking about right now, because it's not limited to horticulture. We can use this for broadacre agriculture, and that's where we get the huge benefits of reduced fertilizer use and maintained yields. So we see that as a great way to start. I hope that starts to answer the question about seaweed foliar biostimulants.
So it's the action is through molecules that are in the seaweed then?
Yes, they're organic molecules. They include cytokines, gibberellins, and auxins, among others.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool.
My pleasure. Catherine, good to see you again.
Oh, good to see you. And twice in one day. Wow.
My pleasure.
So I've got two questions. One, I'm a big grow, I guess that was what you were calling it. Is that available to buy?
Yeah, we're providing it right now in the Philippines, and we could consider doing some special orders from and bring it from the Philippines to the States. And so feel free to put in some special requests, and we'll try to accommodate them. Sadly, the shipping right now is pretty expensive because it's by air. But actually, if we can find, let's say, 50 hectares where we'd like to apply it, then we can invest in a IBC 1,000-liter IBC container, and we can have that shipped by sea from Manila, from the Philippines to the States. And then that will be a lower carbon intensity, and that would enable us to do it. So would love to build kind of a grassroots efforts, and let's see if we can get 1,000 liters on order, and we'll be happy to distribute those. So let's see if we can network and get that 1,000 liters. We'll make it.
And I have another question about water temperature, because with the loss of ice, the oceans are not going to get colder, and that's really shifting the currents. So how is that impacting what you're planning to do? Because I am assuming you're pretty well working with what we have now, and that's all going to shift. So
it will shift. And I think it's most severely seen today in the Arctic. And I like to think of the ocean planet Earth as a glass of ice water. So imagine a glass of ice water here. I'll take off the top. And if you've got ice in your ice water and you start heating up the water, it doesn't change temperature until the last ice cube melts. And that's what we're talking about in the Arctic. Effectively, we've had a huge buffer of less global warming because we've had all that sea ice. Well, we've now melted 2/3 of the sea ice, and the sea ice under business as usual is going to be gone in the 2030s and seasonally in September. As soon as that last ice cube melts, this temperature of this ocean planet Earth is going to skyrocket. And in a real sense, we've got to refreeze the Arctic. So it's a matter of, yes, emissions have to go to zero. We have to get serious about drawing down carbon with nature-based solutions like marine permaculture in the sea and biochar on land. And we have to actually work to refreeze the Arctic, and there are several ways to do that, and several groups like the Healthy Climate Action, HPAC, Healthy Planet Action Coalition, I believe, and several other groups are working on refreezing the Arctic. So I think our challenge and our opportunity is to make sure that we have those buffers in place. That said, Professor Andrew Thompson of Caltech Environmental Sciences has confirmed that the deep water that we're upwelling, which is very cool, is in fact a renewable resource. And thus there's more huge spare drops of deep water that's formed each year off Antarctica. And that can continue to cool our ocean if we can restore the natural upwelling. So I see that really restoring natural upwelling as being an essential part ultimately of that thermal balance. And there are several papers out that have documented the cooling effect that would occur from restoring this natural upwelling. So we see that as a good mechanism that regions and nations, particularly in the tropics, can use to hold the line at 1.5 degrees in their regions, if not on the planet as a whole. I'm worried that the United Nations is quickly giving up on their committed goal of 1.5 degrees, and overshooting is going to have profound consequences. So our challenge and opportunity is to enable regions to maintain those temperatures with techniques like ocean thermal energy conversion and deep sea water cooling.
Would it be possible to have us have you back, or somebody else back if that's better, to really talk about how to manage that cooling? Because I think that's just so key. And it's so not understood at all. I mean, people are talking about the rise in sea levels. Well, boo, we can move inland. That's not a big deal. What's a big deal is the change in water temperature, and to raise that consciousness and get people to understand how important it is and what we can do about managing that, because it's just not a conversation that I'm hearing, and I would love that if that would be possible.
I'd be happy to come back and talk in more detail about how we can manage our coastal temperatures with restored natural upwelling. That'd be great. Thank you, Catherine. Carl, you
Thank
had a
you.
question?
Well, so many questions and thoughts, and like my first question is really simple. What's the biostimulants that you used in Napa? What's the normal source or typical source?
I think typically they're using a high latitude species. Ascophyllum nodosum is a brown seaweed called a bladderwrack, which probably grows from Northern California up towards Canada. And it's okay. I think it works well. It is a wild harvest, and there are certain limits to how much that can be scaled. That said, we've got, between you and me right now, 100 million square kilometers of mostly open and mostly empty ocean. And all of that area will be accessible with marine permaculture when we have these floating islands that can be submerged, and we have the deep water irrigation technique. We can take what's effectively a mostly deserted ocean, and we can regenerate that production. So it's a huge scaling opportunity. And using less than 1% of one ocean, we should be able to ensure food security, regenerate ecosystems, and measure potentially gigatons of carbon export. So it's a great scaling opportunity. And we find that these tropical seaweeds are particularly effective at drought resilience and heat resilience. So we see that as a good opportunity for growth as well. So it'll be a combination of seaweeds around the planet. And I think there's a good opportunity using to cultivate this way. In addition, we are working with groups from Tasmania to Canada to help regenerate kelp forests in more temperate latitudes. So I would say a variety of species. And it's great to see Christiana on the phone today, because we even have a plan for regenerating life in the Mediterranean and restoring the sardines to Sardinia. And Christiana is in Greece, where I hope we'll be able to grow seaweed before long in deep water near her home community and region in Greece.
Just another follow-up question. So the primary source today is seaweed for the biostimulants.
There are other biostimulants as well, but I think the seaweed foliar biostimulants are perhaps some of the most sustainable approaches, particularly since they're carbon negative and climate positive. So we see this as a key opportunity going forward, and wouldn't be surprised if many, if not most, biostimulants in the future move towards seaweed sources in the future.
Brian, I'd be really curious to hear about your experience partnering. You've got a bunch of groups listed on the slide, and I mean, Xprize is a case in point. What was it like working with them, and have you gotten value from that beyond the money? Has there been other kind of layers of value that have been important?
There have been networking. I think there are a number of volunteers that have been attracted by that. And I think it's effective in terms of getting the word out. We've had a lot more engagement, let's say from a public relations standpoint. And that's always important to get on the map. It's also important from a validation perspective. They had a very high level, I would say, technically astute, large team of reviewers. And that third-party validation of the approach is really a significant development. I think there were more than 1,100 registrants for the Xprize for carbon removal, and being selected in the top 1% is just a great honor and achievement. Really hats off to our entire team in helping make that happen. It was a fairly detailed process, lots of development. In fact, we had to work with a number of partners, including Princeton University and Cambridge University and the Zoological Society of London to actually provide a level of third-party validation for the work we were doing. And I believe that may have been a contributing factor to our winning the prize. So it required us to build a network of third-party validators who could come in and have a look at what we're doing and be fairly open about what we're doing and describe the methodologies that we're hoping to utilize and standardize in the future. So it's like the grain of sand that ultimately causes a pearl to form. And, usually these opportunities like this are always, they always present themselves in the context of work, but also of opportunity. And so, I think by working with that grain of sand, we're able to create a pearl and really appreciate that support. And I think equally important are our connection with universities around the world. We've just had some graduate students from Taiwan come and spend a week with us to measure the biogeochemistry. They're now embarking on a 4-year program that we're hoping to support them with to actually develop marine permaculture as a food security source there. And we see that as one of several countries on the Pacific Rim who are adopting marine permaculture and supporting it with multi-year development programs. So we're keen to lead this multinational effort. And in fact, we're just embarking now on more work with the United Nations and the FAO, Food Agriculture Organization, to ensure the rights of indigenous seaweed cultivators to cultivate their seaweeds and develop and enhance the biodiversity by selective breeding of a single species on a worldwide basis. So we see that as a really key transformation as well, that we're hoping to partner with groups with over the next 24 months and ensure future rights. And we just see that as really essential. So there's a few of the partnerships that we've been working on. And then we have seaweed cultivators that ultimately realize that as the planet warms further, there'll be less and less natural seaweed production for better or worse. And that means we're going to need to irrigate and see the kind of productivity improvements that you see from irrigating rice fields. And ultimately, it's the same order of magnitude. So by moving offshore, we have less impact on coastal resources. By moving offshore, we can access deep water and deep water nutrients, and ultimately provide that kind of life support system that the ocean, planet Earth, is going to need to survive these difficult decades to come.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Well, okay, so that's the other one. That's the obvious question is like, what are your big constraints? Is it still money, or are you running into other constraints?
Mostly, it's money at this point. In California, if you want to grow an acre of kelp near shore, it's 17 state and federal agencies that you have to get approval with. And some of our colleagues there have been waiting a dozen years and more for all those approvals. So that's the sort of, death by 1,000 cuts, if you will. We're trying a different approach, and that is we're hoping to register next year marine permaculture vessels. And when we register those vessels as barges, they can fly the Australian flag. And then we can present that to the US Coast Guard and either fly the Australian flag, or once the vessels are registered in the US, they can fly the American flag. And those vessels are allowed the right of safe passage, as the US Navy is protecting in the Pacific right now. Safe passage is critical. And we intend to basically meet all the all the laws, the maritime laws of the last 500 years, which has more precedent than real estate. And fundamentally, there are plenty of ships that sail the Santa Barbara Channel between Los Angeles and China every day. Multi-hectare vessels go through there, and so a 1 hectare of seaweed that's obeying all the laws and has the right navigation equipment and all the rest. We see that as let's say a transformational approach to addressing some of the bureaucracy that we have to face today in some countries.
There's always a flip side, right? So you're gonna invent like seaweed piracy or something too, right? It's gonna be another side.
Well, I won't call it piracy. The life expectancy of a pirate was about 2 or 3 years in the Atlantic. So I think instead we'll just call it let's apply the laws with the most precedent, and there's 500 years of maritime law supporting the right of safe passage of ocean vessels, and ultimately using a vessel approach. Greece is a great place. So many vessels are registered in Greece, so we'll register our vessels in Greece, and then we'll ensure to follow all the maritime laws. And there are no inputs, right? We're not putting anything in the ocean. We'll have a bit of biofouling. Occasionally we'll harvest that biofouling. And that'll be our transformational vessels that we hope we can take to countries across the world. More than 100 big ocean nations to work with.
That's beautiful. Catherine, you have another question?
I do. So Bruce, I'm wondering about, my mind is not allowing me to say the right terms, but the water cycle between plants, trees in particular, and how that brings down rain, and how does it in any way factor into what we were talking about earlier in terms of trying to cool the planet enough to keep the ice on it? Or is there a connection between these, and could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, there is. In fact, one of our board members, Dr. Ray Schmidt, who's a National Academy of Sciences fellow, has in recent years identified that sea surface salinity measured in parts of the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean have a greater predictive ability on rainfall in the United States than El Nino and La Nina and the ENSO oscillation. That was amazing. And in fact, they have a business they're using for seasonal climate forecasting with his sons to actually predict the weather based on the sea surface salinity measurements in the Northwestern Atlantic and perhaps the Pacific Oceans. And what that measures is the amount of evaporation that's coming off the oceans and producing moisture in the atmosphere that can rain as clouds seasonally, particularly in the summertime. And that rain, you can go over and over again. In other words, if you get more evaporation in the Caribbean and the Western Atlantic, that'll rain on Texas and produce lots of afternoon showers. And the next morning, the sun will evaporate that water, and it'll go up to Oklahoma and rain on Oklahoma. And the next day, it'll evaporate in Oklahoma and it'll go up towards Kansas or Missouri, and work its way right on up to the Midwestern Northern Plains. And there's an example of how our interaction with the ocean has a profound effect on that rainfall. In addition, when we have more forests, like the Amazon rainforest creates its own rain. It's got so much moisture that when the sun hits the trees, they evaporate. Instead of getting hot, they evaporate lots of moisture. Those form cumulus clouds. And the summertime here, I've got perfectly clear skies here this morning, but in Queensland. But by the afternoon, there'll be these cumulus clouds, beautiful towering cumulus clouds and some rain. And that migrates the moisture from one place to the next. And so through forestation on land and perhaps in the sea, we can ensure enough evaporation and enough evapotranspiration to take place. And by greening the planet, ensuring we cover our crops, ensuring we've got silvopasturing, which involves trees and crops and potentially livestock to live in the same acreage. And we're finding time and again, it's not food or energy, it's food and energy. We want to be doing solar and food growing in the same acres. We want to be doing we want to be doing trees and crops and livestock in the same acres. And that's what I think deep permaculture has. It's multi-species. It's a little less convenient, but I think there are transformational ways. And in the sea as well. We've got these solar panels on the platform, and we've just figured out a way to do a hectare of kelp and a hectare of solar collection on the same hectares. And it turns out the kelp can grow, right interspersed with the solar. And so you end up getting a full hectare of both, and it's not either or, it's yes and. And that's what we're hoping to do, and bring energy security and diesel displacement to coastal communities that are relying on diesel generators today. So imagine, a marine permaculture coming to a community possibly near you or in a developing nation that can set anchor and provide a cable to shore and displace diesel power from sunrise to sunset. We see that as a huge opportunity to reduce the carbon intensity of what we're doing today, bring livelihoods and energy security and food security to coastal communities that today are collapsing, and help them to survive and ultimately to thrive. With deep water irrigation, we can get nature back on track. And we find time and again, if we give nature half a chance, she'll rebound with exponential bounty. And that rebounding is an essential part of what it's all about. We already have thousands of anchovies and hundreds of tuna, dozens of dolphins, and even a whale shark take up residence around our platform in the Philippines. And that's just the beginning. I think it's the tip of the iceberg. We're looking forward to bringing all of nature back with this regenerative intervention.
How do you think that the platforms are going to interact with fisher people? Are you going to, there's already management issues around the commons with fishing.
Well, we've seen it already, and it's not a zero-sum game. It turns out in the Philippines, we have our small platforms, but those are bringing in the sardine fishermen. They're like, you've got the good stuff. The sardines are there. We can go. They go right out there day and night, and they're fishing for sardines around the edge of the platform. As we expand out to a hectare, that's 2.5 acres. Now we've got a real habitat for, it's an entire forest for the sardines and the anchovies. So they can live inside that habitat and be perfectly safe and happy. We do enforce no dynamite fishing, no cyanide fishing, and we report it to the authorities when it happens. So following the rules, and we've got the microphones to know if there's dynamite fishing. If there's any cyanide fishing, our seaweed turns bleach white. So we will know if that happens, and we report it to the authorities. And around the edges, the sustainable fishing side of it, we want to make that the norm. And it's really seaweed and fish. It's not taking anything away. So that's the wonderful message, and we hope to take that across the world to Chilean catch shares, to the Monterey sardine fisheries that were pre-industrially, and to the herring that used to live off of Hokkaido. They used to harvest 1 million tons of herring in the 1890s every year. And sadly, that fishery collapsed in 1953. The Saccharina kelp forest collapsed in the following decades, and they went back and measured the stable isotopes in those seaweeds, and they found out that those seaweeds were growing because they were being fertilized by the herring, and the herring laid their eggs in the seaweed. So it's a double ecosystem collapse. And our challenge and our opportunity is regenerate the Saccharina kelp forest, bring the herring back in small quantities. They'll lay eggs in the Saccharina kelp forest. They'll grow and grow and grow. And because we've changed the environmental conditions with deep water irrigation, they'll eventually spill out and over and form their own schools, which will go all the way to the Sea of Okhotsk in the future, as they did in centuries past. So that's our chance to rebuild fisheries, and we'll do it 1 hectare at a time of marine permaculture seaforestation.
I remember visiting the fish farms on Hawaii that were created in the old days, and the notion that you, in some sense, are creating a fish lens that fishermen actually may want to invest in or protect is, I think, fascinating. It fits nicely into this, the Ostrom's ideas around how do you protect the commons, and the fact that the people who are participating in the commons have to be there protecting it. So you've kind of got nice synergies for that.
I think a great example of that are Chilean catch shares, where the Chilean fishermen used to be scrambling all over each other with a smaller and smaller season. And it was just a race to the bottom. And then they set up catch shares, which registered every vessel according to tonnage, gave everyone a slice of the pie, and they could take 10 months to go harvest their sardines. But every time they came in, that catch would be weighed and it would be credited against their limit. And that transformed the industry from hunting to animal husbandry, and from competition to fishing associations. And these fishing groups now meet regularly and talk about how do we make the size of the catch bigger. They enforce the exclusive economic zone boundaries. They keep out predatory fishing from other nations, and they I think would in principle be interested in marine permaculture platforms that could help to regenerate, particularly when we get back into an El Nino oscillation. The El Nino phase was named, I think, originally by the Chilean fishermen who saw the productivity of their oceans drop during the warming El Nino times. So the challenge and the opportunity, this is technology that will enable them to survive during a difficult El Nino years to come.
So fun. I'm thinking back to the slide you had on costs and the declining cost curve, which is
Yes.
very exciting to see. And I'm just trying to get a little bit more background. Kind of how, like, I mean, are you thinking that at some point is this a commercial business? Can you make this a profitable enterprise that I don't know, has traditional economic dynamics, or is it going to be continually subsidized?
No, we're planning to help launch the marine permaculture industry and build a global alliance of marine permaculture operators and ecosystem stakeholders around the world. And such a global marine permaculture alliance will be the way to scale. One of my advisors from Caltech, Carver Mead, said that business are the engines of scaling, and ultimately we need to triple the area under deep water irrigation each year for the next dozen years in order to reach a gigaton by the mid 2030s. A gigaton of carbon fixation. That'll be a real climate wedge, in addition to providing food security and ecosystem services. And so the challenge and the opportunity is to make that happen. And it's interesting because Moore's law was used to predict semiconductors and even solar panels at the beginning, and we've seen the benefits of Moore's law. It turns out Wright's law has been a more accurate predictor of even semiconductor production and the price of semiconductors, the price of solar panels, and even the price of airplanes, because it was invented back in 1936 by a fellow named Wright, no relation to Orville and Wilbur Wright. But he, in 1936, predicted the falling price of airplanes based on the cumulative production. And for every doubling of production, you get a 20 or 30% reduction in cost. And we use that in our models of marine permaculture and our known and planned innovations as far as the R&D roadmap we hope to pursue at the Climate Foundation to enable higher performance and lower cost deep water irrigation to take place and make it economically sustainable to start with, and then build into these markets for biostimulants, for livestock feeds, reducing enteric methane emission of ruminant livestock, and ultimately for seaweed as food. I have a little bit of seaweed every day, and look what's happened to me.
You look tremendous.
I'm 100 years old. I haven't told anybody. Anyway,
so have you got when does it? How many years does it take to go to? I mean, I guess the standard would be to recoup investment or as a minimum, right? But what are we projecting?
Yeah. Today it might be 5 years to get a payback on the invested capital, and that includes capital expenditure and operational expenditure. I think as we get into the optimizations and the hurricane proofing and all the rest, that'll actually come down to 2 or 3 years as we build 100 hectares and more. And so we're looking forward to designing it once, getting it running, and then scaling it 1,000 times. I think ultimately this is about keeping it small and artisanal, and a community can manage a hectare, a coastal community, a group of fishermen can manage a hectare, and that's a great size for us to go to market with. And we're hoping to enable that in thousands of communities across the Indo-Pacific and the Mediterranean to start with.
Fantastic. Carl's got his hand up, but let me make sure that everybody else has had a chance to talk, ask questions if you had them. Carl?
This might be a dorky story, but it's a story that I always think about this, but particularly when you're talking about seaweed and cattle. This is something I heard on the radio a long time ago where somebody had called into the talk show complaining that McDonald's was putting seaweed into their milkshakes for a thickener. And the talk show person said, that's not so bad, that they're also putting cow in the hamburgers.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's just such a great idea. It's sort of a marker of like how crazy our the way we think about food is.
Well, I have to share the story. There were two little girls that were isolated. They were, stuck on an island in Alaska somewhere, and they had a rowboat. They flipped it upside down, and they managed to get shelter from the rain underneath the rowboat. And they ate seaweed for 4 months, and amazingly, they were found 4 months later, having survived for 4 months on seaweed on the coast of that island in Alaska.
What year is this? Is this 1800s?
It's probably, I don't know. I read it 3 or 4 years ago, and I was amazed that in a pinch, in fact, there are examples of sheep in the Orkney Islands that live off 100% seaweed. Now, I don't recommend it as a standard practice, but there are other sheep that routinely they've access to pasture and seaweed, and they're like 50% seaweed and 50% pasture. So there are plenty of examples of livestock living, a substantial part of their diet on seaweed. In fact, the deer, the wild deer in New Zealand go down to the beach at night and eat seaweed. Like 10% of their diet could be seaweed. And this is really significant that with ruminant livestock, wild ruminant livestock of their own volition, go down on the beach at night and eat seaweed. The hunters shoot them down there. That's how they know they're down there. And we see cows on the beach eating seaweed on pasture as well. And amazingly, the Canadian farmer that had a road going through his coastal property had half the cows on the beach and half the cows on pasture. And the cows that had access to the beach were heavier, healthier, and by some measures happier than the ones on the other side of the road. So that was a great starting indication that, in fact, we need to develop some seaweed salt licks for the 1.5 billion cattle and other ruminant livestock that are on the planet, including 500 million dairy cows in India. So there's a lot of transformation that can take place in the next few years. So great question, Carl. Michael?
Thanks.
Hello. It's just such a delight to just sit and listen to you. I just thank you for being you. My question was triggered by a remark you made about that the Chilean fishermen became the enforcers against predatory behavior. And so this is actually a cultural question rather than an ecological one. And there's this big tension about if we all just love each other enough, then we can all, and a different a mindset is no, we need to have guardians of sections, guardians, and there has to be a membrane in order for it to be defended, managed, and so there's this question of do we all just trust and love, or to what degree does successful how to attend to human behaviors, this question of more love or more enforcement of self-regulation. Any thoughts on this, or you might frame it a completely different way? Human behavior around.
Right, that's essential. And I'll take a moment to say, well, first of all, fences make good neighbors. That it's pretty essential for people to have a stake in what's happening. And I would like, to start with, that each fisherman has a stake in a share of the fisheries in that region. So in a sense, they now have a sense of ownership, right? And it's that sense of ownership that's absolutely essential from our work across Africa and India and Southeast Asia. If there's one thing we've learned is you can't do it with handouts. It has to be instead that we're enabling and empowering these communities to take ownership of their own world, to show them how to fish and enable them to fish. And that's our challenge and our opportunity. And so I think we need the pride of ownership. We need to have a feeling that everyone has a share in the community for those the territorial use rights fishing across Philippines and Indonesia, the Chilean catch shares. So I think in that sense, good fences make for good neighbors. That said, I will say that the biggest challenges, because you mentioned the social needs and challenges, I think we need to embrace the permaculture design principles that laid the foundations for permaculture work on land. We're extending those to the marine environment, and Dave Holmgren and I are publishing an article along with Scott Spilius from the University of Queensland in the coming weeks in One Earth Journal on applying the dozen permaculture design principles to the marine environment. And then I think we need to develop, starting now, social permaculture that really enables us to move beyond the tyranny of autocracy, past the tyranny of the majority and democracy, and towards the consent of the governed through what I'll call social permaculture. And that's where I think we need to transform our thinking and our decision-making. And I look to the Haudenosaunee nations of the circle of clan mothers balancing the circle of chiefs, the yin and the yang, if you will, of our leadership, which is missing today. We have a lot of yang and not so much yin. So I think we need to develop those capacities and go back to some of our First Nations roots to find them. Great questions, Michael, and thank you.
Christiana. So
You're muted, Christina.
I'm not muted. It's not working very well, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. First of all, I would like to say that it's an old ancient secret that our goats and our sheep in the Greek islands that produce absolutely magnificent meat, cheeses, and all kinds of other products that the sheep and goat produce are fed with the number one thing that is available, which is algae, okay, on the coasts.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, so I do second that motion. And number two, I would like to say that I come from a country where the law was to destroy the small ships that the fishermen 3,000 years were making a living out of. Thus, I am putting a request in here, and I think that Brian has heard it before. The world and the matters are not going to be changed unless we have proofs. And it's like in the labs. We have to prove that this unit works to move to the next one. It is absolutely essential. And I see it in every day that I work with my community, that we need to build a pilot little thing where everything that Brian talked about, they can put their hand onto the thing and can understand what is it that is happening. That's the only way that we can change the minds of people. Unless they see it and they put their hands on it, talking to them will not help. So this is my life's work, to have a small pilot, and I don't know how to call it, but a marine co-op school would be what I would be looking for in a regenerative framework for every community, at least in the Mediterranean region. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Christiana. We're really happy to have your support and looking forward to deploying marine permaculture hectares in the Mediterranean in the near future. Stan.
Unmute the thing. Okay. I put a question in the chat, but you may not have seen it. Are damaged fisheries being likely to be helped by this kind of work?
Yes, a great
Because that
example.
would be huge. I mean, that's where your profit comes from. If a fishery says, okay, we're going to spend some money, rebuild our fishing capacity, and then they start making money that way, then that pays for whatever else they had to do in order to
Yes.
make it happen.
Cousteau, Jacques Cousteau once said, we must transform humanity's relationship with the sea from hunters to farmers, he said. And I'll embrace that and extend it beyond farming, which has inputs, to mariculture, which does not have inputs. And we don't need inputs. There's plenty in the sea already. We just need to restore the natural upwelling and enable it to go. And that fundamentally is the key to transforming humanity's relationship with the ocean from extraction to regeneration. And I think that, the challenge is to get there in one step. I've met with the long line tuna fishermen in Hawaii, and they're still in hunter mode. They've made a lot of money, but it's also a diminishing return. And there's an opportunity, a chance to pay it forward. So we need to find those progressive segments of the fishing industry that say, oh, actually growing more fish might be a good idea, even though they're wild fish growing on the seaweed platform. And we'll find those eventually. I hope it's sooner rather than later. And the progressive components of the fishing industry, we can create these floating islands of life, these habitats for sardines. I've talked to some sardine catchers, and they said, as soon as you prove it, we'd love to invest. So we have a couple leads, even in California. And I'm hoping that we can regenerate the sardine fisheries off Monterey. I believe that we have the keys to production based on the order of magnitude improvements that we've seen in the Western Pacific. And with support and help from probably all of you, we'll eventually be able to deploy a model scale and a hectare off the California coast, off the US, and enable marine permaculture hectares to operate in US waters in the future and help to regenerate fisheries from there across the Indo-Pacific.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Eleanor Ostrom, and she talks about how she made her ideas based on studying fisheries and other kinds of shared resources. And yeah, so it's exciting. I think all these things, and my role in this is to try to figure out who to connect to who. And so I need to do more studying and find out more.
Definitely.
And I think maybe what I need to do is to work with Catherine on collecting information into other networks that might be useful in your new podcast.
Oh, yes.
So,
no, that would be wonderful. And
Yes.
we'd love to help in any way, and happy to be a resource on how we can grow the momentum and grow the effort.
Yeah, I need your appointment maker. Your
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Yes, happy to send that. I'll leave a couple links in the chat. So I'll be happy to do that. First of all, for people wanting more information, we've got recent articles, presentations, and podcasts.
Dan, is it .com or .org for other networks?
climatefoundation.org. My email is brian@climatefoundation.org, and happy to send additional information, and people can get in touch with me that way, or on LinkedIn also works.
Thanks, Brian. I don't know if anybody else has any last comments. I'll post the chat and a link to the video in the Slack. If the Slack doesn't work for you, let me know, and I can email stuff to you as well. I guess I can stick my email in the chat. I'm so appreciative of the work you're doing, Brian, and the time you're taking to talk with us. If there are things that GRC can do to support you, please, let's do that. Otherwise, maybe we'll just let you, I don't know, I guess your day starting, or are you going back to bed? I never know what your schedule looks like.
I got a couple more cat naps, and I've learned to live with a twice a day sleep schedule, and that enables me to connect with the States in my mornings and with Europe in the evenings. So it's worked pretty well over the past couple of years.
An amazing adaptation.
Yeah, no, it's great to make it work. Actually, it's inspired from I think it was Jefferson and others who talked about second sleep, and how they'd have 2 sleep periods during the day, and that's working pretty well for me. So I recommend it for global workers around the world. So it's turned out to be a great schedule, and I'd probably with more people by staying in one place than by world at this point.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, David, for being the enabler of this
Thanks
moment.
a lot, everybody. Great to see you.
Definitely. GRC is amazing, and I'm so glad to be part of this GRC family. So David,
Thanks for all the contributions you make. Yeah. They're
hats
huge.
off to you for 3 years and counting on the GRC. It's just an incredible, I would say, an incubator for amazing developments.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Bye-bye.